The Burrows of Berea is a conversational podcast.
We study the Bible and we talk about it.
Not all of us are of the same faith.
And one of us doesn't have a faith.
But we still love one another, and we're going to continue to talk about these things.
The things we believe in and the things we believe about what we read in the Bible. Not all of these are necessarily true. Some of it is opinion and speculation. Thank you for
listening and speculating with us.
There you go. That was good. Yes.
You are listening to the Burrows of Berea.
Nody note, nody notes from the underground.
Welcome to Notes from the Underground. This is a podcast where we take a microscope to some of Christianity's thornier topics and people. I'm your host, Tiziana Mom So Hard Severse. And I've got a couple of friends with me today. On the left, I've got Ella Edgerton.
Hi.
How's it going? And then Sarita the Edge Edgerton.
Hello.
Ladies, it's good to have you.
That's my baby right there.
Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? And you'll also notice I did not intro Rick, the Podfather Welch, and I did not intro Andy because they're not allowed to talk today. This is a ladies-only podcast because we are going to be diving into a ladies-only topic today. I mean, just kidding. No, obviously not, right?
No, I'm dying right now. I'm dying right now.
Yeah. Which, by the way, if you are a gentleman, please listen. You're not kicked out of the room.
This will learn you something about your woman.
Hopefully this will learn you something and learn you something about yourself even maybe in the process.
Can
right?
I just say right now?
Yeah.
I feel so much like that SNL skit where they did with what's his name? He just got indicted for manslaughter. Alec Baldwin with the Christmas one where they were like, the PBS is
the NPR
sweaty balls. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's what I feel like with the three of us here doing the female thing.
Those are some of my favorite
when it was funny
episodes when they were funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah, back in the day, those are really funny. We might get a couple of those in there. We might get a couple of good puns in here while we're at it. But so the topic of our study today, folks, ladies and gentlemen, and all y'all listening, is the Proverbs 31. So as we like to do here, we're going to go ahead and just start with a little bit of historical background. And then unlike previous podcasts, this one is going to be a little bit more of a discussion. So there's going to be lots of opportunities to pause and like chit chat and talk and feel this out because, everybody interacts. All of us in this room, we have our own way of walking as a woman in the world. We have our own unique experiences and our own unique interactions with God and our own unique life stories. And so that's all important. And so I think that rather than just me talking, I'd like for everybody to feel free to interject because I used to have this pastor that always used to say, God wants to use, your voice and your personal experience to reach your audience. And so that's the wonderful thing about scripture is that each person has the opportunity to shine their own unique voice on that scripture and reach their own people. So
I have a joke.
Oh, coming in hot. Let's hear it.
What is the title of the thinnest book in the world?
Oh, Lord. The title of the thinnest book in the world.
I have no idea.
Weight Watchers. What? No.
What Men Know About Women. Boom.
Boom. Oh, my gosh.
There's a second edition. It's really big now. It's just all blank. It just looks better on a shelf, though.
Well, and that's I keep coming back in my own mind as I was doing this study to the Simonides poem that I'd read on women, which is this very ancient Greek poem about women. And yeah, it's just ridiculous and unacceptable. Yeah.
Oh, is that you read that right on here?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. That was wild.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Well, traditionally, the Greeks didn't like women. They
weren't
liked
even
the
human.
male
They weren't even
form.
people. They were non-humans. Yeah.
Yeah. And it goes back to what I've said in here numerous times is that what Christianity has done for the female personhood, the woman, is liberating beyond belief.
And that is what we are. Girl, you're setting it up. You're going to just set them up and knock them down. I love it because that's what we're talking about today. So before we jump into the actual scripture, I did a little bit of like historical background on Proverbs, just in general, because I like to start out that way, thinking about the socio-historical context of these books. So Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes and Song of Solomon are all part of a literary genre referred to by scholars as wisdom literature. So we find this kind of literature all throughout the ancient Near East, and it's generally just concerned with the realities of human experience, from the mundane to the sublime, and with the relationship between that experience and the divine. So that's really what we're looking at here. Proverbs, Job, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Solomon are all part of that. They're not necessarily historical books. They don't contain a whole lot. They're not history books. You don't have any references to the patriarchs or any of that. They're just sort of meant to be art. So a proverb, of course, is a short, pithy saying expressing insight or stating a general truth, and it's the most universally utilized form of wisdom literature, which as a global phenomenon has sprung up in India, Egypt, China, Greece, and other Mesopotamian cultures as early as the 3rd millennium BCE. So this is something that was around for a while, and the Hebrew people picked up the genre and ran with it with the book of Proverbs. So this particular book is a really amazing collection of folk wisdom that was likely collected over the years, but then compiled and written down under Solomon's reign, which is why he's attributed in 1:1 as the Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. So, I'm sure he did write some of them, but throughout the course of the book, there are other people that are referenced. Like, for example, we're going to be talking about Proverbs 31 today, which is an oracle of King Lemuel. Which, whatever, nobody knows who in the world that even is. So, or like the sayings of Augur are another one, or like just the sayings of the wise, right? So, and this was also not an uncommon practice.
So it makes me wonder, though, were there books or something that they were reading where if you said, this is the sayings of Augur, everybody would have known what you were talking about. Like if I say, this is the saying of Stephen Hawking's, you may not know what he said. You may not have read any of his books, but you know who we're talking about. This is what Martin Luther King said. We just celebrated Martin Luther King Day.
Yeah.
We all know who that is.
Yeah.
So I wonder, Lemuel, the brothers from King Lemuel's mother. I mean, it had to be maybe like that. Maybe she's like the Brothers Grimm or a Mother Goose fairy tales or something like that. Yeah. Somebody knew who Mother Goose was.
Somebody knew. Yeah. And somebody knew who the sayings of Augur were, like, because they wouldn't have put it in the book if it wasn't relevant, And that was also like a common theme, because when Israel kind of coalesced into a monarchy, which didn't happen until Saul, and then you had David, and then you had Solomon. So this was like the kingdom was fresh, and they were doing good and they were thriving. So it was during this period of time that you started to see within the temple a lot of these things happening, a lot of these things being started to be written down, because now all of a sudden there was money and there was like a concentrated space for the money to go. And there was now a temple that was a concentrated and specific space for the scholars to be doing their thing. So it was also we read about this in the book of Ruth, how, at the very end, we have the discussion about, and this is the lineage of David. And so that's kind of a way that we can date the book, but also it was just like common for during the reigns of these kings to be writing all of a sudden this material, because it was part of how you supported and lifted up the monarchy, because like all these wonderful things were being done like within their reign. So, so the collection started probably happening during Solomon's reign, and he probably did write some of them, that much we are sure.
Listen, when you're in prosperity and not war, you got time for art.
You got time for art. That's exactly right.
Otherwise, you're fighting.
Exactly. And that's why
and
it's
dying.
Also, yes. And so I think that's why this also happened during Solomon's reign, because that was a period of relative peace in the history of Israel. It was before the divide. It was before,
It was after David, who was a warrior king.
Right. Who had created this space of peace. Exactly. So I used to have friends that were in bluegrass bands, and they used to talk a lot about like the Carter family tunes and how this is a very similar situation. So like we have all of these songs that have been subscribed to the Carter family, and A.P. Carter wrote them, but really he didn't. He took a lot of songs that were public domain, or he took a lot of songs that were just like familiar songs from the folks in the holler and just put his own spin on them and wrote them down. And so it's possible that a lot of this is the same that we're experiencing here in the Proverbs. And folks, we just had a guest pop in Miss LaKeisha Lee.
Hey,
I'm so happy to see you.
I'm glad to be here.
Keisha and I used to go to
Welcome.
church together for a long time, and we haven't seen each other for a long time. Yeah, we were cohorts in the youth ministry in our church and all kinds of stuff. And so I'm really excited that you're here because I think you're going to have some unique perspectives on this particular topic as well.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, the traffic on 26 is just horrendous. It takes forever to get here.
Mm-hmm. And the rain. It's not
And the
helping.
rain. It's not helpful. And the construction.
I call it the concrete funnel because that's what it feels. It feels like you're driving 80 miles an hour down a concrete funnel.
It's the worst. It's the worst.
Next to a giant behemoth of a truck going also 80 miles an hour through that concrete
Right.
tunnel.
Oh, and they keep moving because they're building it. They move the
Yeah.
lane shifts, so you never know where they're going to be.
And no one knows what a solid white line is. Do not cross a solid white line.
I'm telling you. I don't even like driving with my kids on 26 anymore. I'm like, it's terrible. So, yeah. Whew. Anywho. Now that
right,
we are
back to
all
the
in
AP
consensus
Carter.
and agreement about that, back to A.B. Carter. So it's like there's some aspect of the book of Proverbs follows this similar idea, right? Some of it is Solomon. We aren't necessarily sure which parts of it are. The first part, the chapters 1 through 9, it follow a really interesting style that is familiar for other people that read ancient Egyptian wisdom literature. There's a piece called Instruction of Amenemope, and it follows the same sort of style of like a parent teaching their child and all this instruction. So it's also possible that stylistically, Solomon was doing a similar thing, but this is how we teach our people. You may have heard it taught this way, again, because you're talking about a people that had come out of Egypt. And so it might have been even like sort of like a correction in some way of creating that same style of literature, but being like, but this is for our people. Because that's the other part about this book that I thought was really interesting is that scholars that have been dissecting the ancient Hebrew have been able to find no evidence that this book was influenced by Greek language or thought, which is not something we can say about the New Testament necessarily. So like this is just pure Jewish thought. This is before the Hellenistic period. So it might have been that last stages of compiling might have happened, like sort of like at the beginning of the Hellenistic period. But that's a really interesting piece too. Like this is just how the Jewish people thought and lived and instructed their family.
At least in an artful
Yeah.
or a liturgical sort of
Yeah.
manner. Yeah.
Yeah.
With their songs and their,
Better a scrap of roof with peace than a home with a quarrelsome wife. Just straight Jewish wisdom.
I mean, he's not wrong.
He's not wrong, right? Yeah. I know. But I think that's another piece about this particular book that I think is fascinating. So again, because there's no real reference to anybody outside of Solomon, it's difficult to really say when exactly it was all
that
put
we
together.
know. Whom we know. We
Yeah.
know Solomon.
Right, who we know.
We
We don't know these other people.
Agar or whatever,
Yeah.
Agar, whatever his
We
name
don't
is.
know.
We don't know, but he's got to be somebody because
We
he's
don't know.
referenced.
Exactly. So for us, the only that's the only point. And the other thing is like because there's this like distinct lack of influence from other cultural beliefs, which is awesome and gives us this sort of unique insight into like the thought process and the way that Jewish people were living their everyday lives. We don't have any like other outside. What's the word? We don't extra biblical evidence based like on archaeological findings. Like we have that for a lot of things. We have, these giant stone tablets that mention battles that are also mentioned in 1 Kings. So we can sort of triangulate and be like, oh, these pieces date from here. So this book dates from here. So this is how this works. Even like Ezra, for example. Ezra begins with, this is an edict given by King Cyrus. The Lord's people are to return home. We actually have a copy of that edict. It's been found. It was written on a cylinder. And so because we have that, we can sort of like do this triangulating and cross-reference. We don't necessarily have that for Proverbs. And so it makes it fun and sort of like an exercise of faith and just a neat little, and also just an idea that we're maybe getting like some pure thought, some pure ideas about how God wanted his people to operate, which is extra special considering what we're about to read. So I don't usually stop and read like an entire thing before I get started, but I kind of want to do that this time because, like, for example, even though Andy is sworn to silence back there and not allowed to participate due to his lack of uterus.
Not one word.
Not one word.
Well, I don't have one. Does that mean I
Oh,
can't?
no. Due to his Y chromosome. Yeah. And the fact that he doesn't have androgen insensitivity syndrome, which would have gave him a girly body. We're going to ignore all of that. Because of your Y chromosome, Andy. Anywho, there's plenty of people out there that are listening that might be like, okay, what are you guys even talking about? Because Proverbs 31, I don't know about you all, but I was intimately familiar with Proverbs 31 from like a very small age.
Not very small, but I've learned about it since, I didn't become a Christian until I became 25. So
Right. Yeah. So I, grew up in church, and Ella, you grew up in church. And yeah, I know you grew up in church.
Yeah.
I know you did.
Yeah.
So the Proverbs 31 was a subject that I was taught a lot.
Ella, would you say you've been taught a lot out of Proverbs 31? I mean, I was her Bible teacher, so.
Oh, well.
Yes. Honestly, from high school, I can remember that the church we used to go to, they would always preach about what it means to be a good wife. Like, how do you do this? How do you do that? And then they wouldn't like preach anything else. Like, they wouldn't really teach anything else. So I've heard about everything.
Yeah. And that's really, and I have
Everything a woman needs to know.
Yeah, right. And in order to be successful
These
for
5
her man.
paragraphs.
Right. Well, and so I have a neighbor that lives behind me, and her and her husband are awesome. They're in their 60s, and they, went to the West Asheville Baptist Church for years. And I was telling her about that I was doing this study, and she gave this like giant full body sigh and was like, yes, the Proverbs 31 woman, the person that we can never measure up to. And I was like, yeah, that's literally how it's been taught. And so if you are
A perfect woman.
yeah, if you are an XX human being, regardless of your uteral status, if you are listening to this podcast and that is your experience, darling daughter, we are going to help you set yourself free from that. If you are an XY chromosome and you're listening to this, let's give you an opportunity to hear maybe a different perspective if you've even been taught Proverbs 31, which is why we're going to read it. We don't necessarily know. I don't know how they teach the boys. I only know how they teach the girls.
It's almost like...
And you don't know.
No, I don't.
You don't know.
I don't know. It's almost like if you grew up with the experience of pressures of the feminine in our culture, kind of thing.
So let's just read it. So that way, before we do the rest of this, we can, if you are not familiar with this particular passage, because of whatever reason, let's go ahead and read it. And honestly, I can't believe I forgot my Bible. I never forget my Bible. So I have to look it up. Do you have your Bible, Sarita?
I do.
Girl, open it up. What version do you read?
I have the ESV on my phone, and then I have the New King James. I've been really falling in love with the ESV recently.
Okay.
So.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm going to load up my Bible. I have it on my phone, but like this is one of those moments where I'm, again, I had the 2 kids today, which is fine, right? I do that all the time. And like trying to pack everything and get myself ready to rock and roll. And then as soon as Dylan gets there, it's like, go, go, go. Because he doesn't get home until 5. And he has to take a shower because he's covered in fiberglass and asbestos and all this nonsense. So he can't like breathe that in. You got to like immediately. So he takes the fastest showers known to man. But at the same time, like the earliest I get out of the house is 5:13. So I did my darndest. But I don't, yeah. Sarita, why don't you go ahead and read just the whole thing since you have your Bible sitting right
From
there.
the beginning?
Just Proverbs 31. Yeah.
From the very first, number 1. Okay.
Yep.
The words of King Lemuel, the utterance which his mother taught him. What, my son, and what, son of my womb, and what, son of my vows? Do not give your strength to women, nor your ways to that which destroys kings. It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law, and pervert the justice of all the afflicted. Give strong drink to him who is perishing, and wine to those who are bitter of heart. Let him drink and forget his poverty, and remember his misery no more. Open your mouth for the speechless, in the cause of all who are appointed to die. Open your mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and needy. Who can find a virtuous wife? For her worth is far above rubies. The heart of her husband safely trusts her, so he will have no lack of gain. She does him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeks wool and flax and willingly works with her hands. She is like the merchant ships. She brings her food from afar. She also rises while it is yet night and provides food for her household and a portion for her maidservants. She considers a field and buys it. From her profits she plants a vineyard. She girds herself with strength and strengthens her arms. She perceives that her merchandise is good, and her lamp does not go out by night. She stretches out her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She extends her hand to the poor. Yes, she reaches out her hands to the needy. She is not afraid of snow, for all her household is clothed with scarlet. She makes tapestries for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known at the gates. When he sits among the elders of the land, she makes fine linen garments and sells them, and supplies sashes for the merchants. Strength and honor are her clothing. She shall rejoice in time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and on her tongue is the law of kindness. She watches over the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, and her husband also, and he praises her. Many daughters have done well, but you excel them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is passing. But a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. Give her of the fruit of her hands, and let her own works praise her in the gates.
Yeah. So this particular chapter is divided.
There's something about reading it out loud.
And I think it's important.
It has something to it. It's just...
Yeah. And I think it's important, if we're going to be doing a scriptural study, right? Let's just make sure let's read the scripture so that we all know what we're talking about, But this particular piece is divided. So the first part you've got is verses 1 through 9, right? And that is, King Lemuel's mother, basically letting him know what are the foundations of a good leader. Don't be a drunkard. Don't give your wisdom to women. But what's also interesting is that it says, so the translation that I have, yours said a word from his mother. And other translations say like an oracle. And when we say a word from the Lord, we're talking about not just that she spoke this thing of her own, but that she was inspired to speak this by God. And I did some research, and there's a difference. Like an oracle, according to the Holman Bible Dictionary, it gives us, it says it's not the same necessarily as a prophecy. So prophecy is a reception, a declaration of a word from the Lord through a direct prompting of the Holy Spirit and the human instrument thereof. And they're usually delivered through prophets and generally relegated to the department of predictions or declarations or judgments, which is what we see in like Isaiah and Ezekiel. This is a human being who has been God's prophet for a period of time, being delivered a word from the Lord, and then it's disseminated. But an oracle is like slightly different. So an oracle is often, though not always, a divine response to a question asked of God and to pronouncements made by God without necessarily him being asked. So in one sense, oracles are prophecies because they sometimes deal with the future, but sometimes they just deal with decisions that are being made in the present. So Malachi is an oracle, for example, because Malachi specifically deals with like the way that they're worshiping in the temple in a post-exilic, or they're returning to their homeland, post-exilic Israel. So I think that's a fascinating place to even start. Like first and foremost, in the world of ancient literature, we're writing down a word from the Lord that was given to this woman to instruct her son. The book opens with Solomon giving all of these instructions to his son, but it ends with a mother teaching her son how to reign properly, and she's been given an oracle from God to deliver to her son.
See, my commentary says that 31 is actually two poems. The Wise King and the Excellent Wife.
Yeah. So you have the first part, which is that's 1 through 9, and then 10 and following is the second part. So 1 through 9 is this oracle delivered to King Lemuel from his mother on how to live and how to rule properly. And even that is just unusual in ancient writings. And so even that from the beginning, like, it gives us a slight picture, even though we don't know who King Lemuel is. Like, nobody knows. And since we don't know exactly why he's significant, it's difficult to say why his mom is significant, you know? But the name Lemuel means like of God. I wrote that down. Let me look for sure. El, translates, of El, or belonging to God. So that's what's really interesting. At least there's that. But so before we even jump into, the rest of the poem, it's interesting that this piece starts with a mother instructing her son in this unique way that only a mother can when it comes to how to deal with women and how to choose a good one and how to guard your eyes and understand like where a woman's true value is, because that's like one of the first things she says is like, don't give your strength to women, right? Like, hold on now. So first of all, that's the first part. And then the second part is where we begin this description of a worthy woman, the excellent wife. This is an acrostic poem, which is it's a literary form where the first letter has some sort of significance. Either it spells out like a name or a statement. In this case, it's the alphabet. So each successive verse begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet, which is really interesting. And so, commentators have reckoned that this could have two purposes. It could have been a mnemonic device because, again, before this was written down, people were passing this stuff on word of mouth. And so oftentimes, when you see acrostics, it has it has a practical purpose, which is so help people can remember it. But another interesting part, because it follows the alphabet, it's this idea that like everything that needs to be said has been said. Like this is topic has now been thoroughly and completely discussed, and nothing. It's like from A to Z, it has been discussed, and so there's nothing left to add. There's nothing left to say. And
yet here we are discussing it.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that it has to do with because the poem is about the praise of women and their purpose and their role and the gift that women are to humanity. And it's outlining all these different kinds of things, because the other thing that's really fascinating is that we've used this as sort of like, we've used Proverbs 31 as an instruction tool for women, that these are the tasks, these specific tasks that you are to engage in. These are exactly how you be a woman, rather than what the poem was meant to be, which was an ode to women. It's not necessarily about the specific activities that are being done, more than it is the spirit and the energy with which these tasks are being done, And in Jewish culture, and this is very interesting too, because I've read this from several different commentators, that in Jewish culture, it's not the women who memorize Proverbs 31, it's the men. And on Shabbat, they sing it to their women. They sing it to their wives. And if you watch The Chosen, season 1, episode 2, Shabbat, opens with them reading this poem at Shabbat, a man reading it to his women. So like to his daughters and when I say his women, let me clarify, the women in his family, his daughters, his sisters, his mothers. And so that first piece for me was hugely freeing in a lot of ways, because again, it's always been, I don't remember the last time y'all got up when it was still dark, right? Or like made your own clothes from flax seed, there's a lot, I have been a business owner at different points in times in my life, but I'm certainly not like sewing sashes for merchants from afar, right? It's more difficult to take some of these tasks and translate them into ways that we can, things that we can understand. And so rather than like, okay, I have to do these things if I'm going to be a good woman in God's standard, it's more about understanding the value of women and praising them for all the things they do that they deserve to be praised for. And so that was something that I found as I was doing this research and as I was reading about it. I thought that was really interesting,
I think it's interesting too, because like in church and the study of the units that we've always done, we've always been taught like this is how you're supposed to be, and you want to be this type of woman. So I think we have that unrealistic expectation due to the way that culture is now, or society is now, of like, we do a lot during the day, but are we doing some of these things? So it gives us this impossible goal to strive for. And we're like, oh man, I still have so much work that I need to do. So thinking of it from the perspective of this was to pay homage to women is like refreshing in a way of like, yeah, we do all of these things in our own way.
Yeah. And maybe not a single woman does all of them, because
Right.
not every woman is married, and not every woman has
Right.
children, and not every woman, is able to run her own business. But it's when you are able to do those things, and you do those things in a way that is in service of God, and when you do those things out of the inborn and God created nature of your femininity, that you deserve to be acknowledged and recognized for those things. I was having this whole conversation with somebody about this the other day, like the way that first wave feminism, because it's shifted, but first wave feminism was all about like opening space in traditionally male environments for women, right? So women can go to work, and women can do all these things. Women can have what men can have, instead of just simply elevating the role that women were already occupying in society. And that what has created this sort of like exhausted woman that is like, has been told you can, have it all, and you can be all these things, and you can have a successful career, and you can be a stay-at-home mom, you can have kids, and we're exhausted. We're exhausted because it's this idea that you can have and be all the things men are, and have and be all the things women are. And that's sort of, I think, a mistake that was made in first wave feminism. And I don't know if we're in a place where we're trying as a society to correct that. But I was reading about how like Gen Zers, for example, Ella, how old are you?
I'm 19.
So you're Gen Z.
Mm-hmm.
Like how there's women within the Gen Z domain, like in that generation, they're like, we don't want to have it all.
Oh, yeah. You see it all the time, like on TikTok.
Because that sounds like it sucks.
Well, her sister, who's 2 years older, also Gen Z.
Yeah.
She said, people would say, "Oh, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And she would say something, and then she would tell me, "Mom, I want to be a wife and a mom." But I feel like if I tell people that, they look down on me.
Right.
And she got married at 19?
19.
Yes. And she's been married 2 years, very happily.
Mm-hmm.
She's not wanting to have it all. I think that was a horrible lie that society tried to, a horrible burden that society tried to put on us. And I'm not a feminist. I love women, and I love my daughters, and I have raised them to be strong in their own right. But I did fall for that for a long time, that I could have it all. And when I dropped my first baby off at daycare, so I could go work for 10 or 12 hours that day and then I cried. And I couldn't do it. I said, "Honey, you're going to have to drop her off from now on. I can't do it."
Mm-hmm.
And from then on out, it was trying to figure out a way that I could be a stay-at-home mom. And it wasn't until after I had Ella here that I got the chance to do that, to be a stay-at-home mom. And I didn't get to be a completely stay-at-home mom, but for the most part I did. And I wouldn't have changed it for anything. But you hear all the time, "Oh, I sacrificed my career to have children." I didn't do that.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's been so hard for me because I felt that way. Having kids.
It's a lie.
Yeah. Well, and that's something that this study, I think that's kind of like one of the reasons why I felt like, because this wasn't top on my list. The Holy Spirit was like, "Why don't you do a study on that?" Because I was like, ew. I don't want to do that right now. But the more that I did it, the more that I realized like I've really struggled because I didn't have kids and wasn't married for a long time. And so I had a career and I had a business and I was going to school and I had these like aspirations. And then I had these kids and all of that had to like go on the back burner. And I felt like this enormous amount of grief because I had been working so hard. And I remember like just like being so angry about it and like talking to Dylan and just being like, this sucks. Like, how come you don't have to sacrifice everything and I have to sacrifice everything? And, I'm like irrelevant now. Like I don't do anything in the world. And my husband looked at me and his eyes, he said, he like looked so sad. And he goes, "It breaks my heart to hear the patriarchy come out of your mouth because that's the patriarchy telling you that the work you do as a woman is not valued. Or that because you're not exercising your rights in the career, domain, that you are somehow not an important piece. Our family would fall apart if you weren't home." Like that's in itself. And I'm sorry that you're not getting recognition on a grand global scale. but like you are raising two young women that are gonna be beautiful and have and be a part of the world, right? In this wonderful way, because you were able to do that. Which isn't to say that if you are a single mom or didn't have the opportunity to have additional supports and had to go to work, that's not also has a story and a voice and a value, right? That's important.
Yeah, I think like just speaking from the opposite end of the spectrum, like, I worked and I had children. So then you still have that same mom guilt that you have if you stay at home or you leave, because it's like, oh, am I sacrificing my children for my career? But I have to do this. Like, so this is what I have to do right now. So am I giving my children what they need? And then how do I find this balance? And I think all of it, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, whether you're working, it's all about this balance that we have for ourselves. And then this expectation that society puts on us that, we have to do these amount of things to be considered a good mom or to be successful or to be whatever it is. But all of it is. And I think like my children are 22 and 21, and what they're learning and what I tell them is like, your life is what you make it. And what you do with your life, like you live your life and you be the woman that you want to be. And however that shows up for the world, it's okay. And I think girls need to hear that more often. Like we need to know that's okay, whatever path you choose, because, some of us are working, some of us are staying home, but that's the path that we are taking at that moment. So we just have to be fully in that moment and give what we can to our children.
Yeah. And I'm lucky enough to have a partner that can pay the bills. Not everybody has that. But
I do have to say that I think where my mom guilt came in, and it was that I couldn't figure out how to do my career and be the mom, a stay-at-home mom. So what I had to do and what I chose to do is I waited tables at night. I was home during the day. I tag teamed out the front door and went about my way, and I waited tables and several nights a week for 15 years in downtown Hendersonville, North Carolina. And but at the same time, people was like, so you're just a waitress?
Yeah. Or you're just a mom? Yeah.
Listen, bruh.
Yeah.
Before I came here, I educated 4 children, fed them, kept them alive all day without any help from anybody else. And I came to work and I put food on your table and fed you and educated you.
Yeah.
And now you're going to leave me a crappy tip and then you're going to leave.
Right.
Whatever. They didn't always leave crappy tips.
Right.
But,
yeah.
It's
the judgment.
It wasn't.
It's just the judgment.
And then they looked down on me, and my husband lost his job when the economy turned in 2008. Well, waiting tables kept food in my kids' mouths, and it kept clothes on their backs. Now, were they the nicest clothes? No. Did sometimes we have to go down to the food pantry? Yes. Did that bring a whole different kind of guilt? Absolutely.
Yeah.
But someone looked at me and said, are you doing what God has called you to do? And I said, yes, I'm homeschooling my kids. And I'm trying to raise them in fear and admonition of the Lord. Our house is filled with laughter and music and love and joy, sometimes yelling. And she can attest to this, but
Ella's like, I'm pleading the fifth. I'm not.
She's an adult. She can't get in trouble anymore. But all that to say is, I think if we can figure out how to tell each woman, you can't do all this. This is not one human being. This is like an amalgamation of human women and their strengths. And look for these things. If you get 5 out of the 10 or how many ever, you're doing great. But a person who's idle and lazy all the time, you're going to have trouble.
Yeah.
You're going to have a woman, you're going to come home from work if she gets to stay home, and the kids are going to be nasty and they're not going to have been fed and whatever. The thing is, look for these qualities. And if you get the majority of them, you're doing fantastic. And if I can be, some of them I am.
Yeah.
Some of them I have been.
Yeah.
So I obviously don't have the toned arms that the lady does in the story. But at one time I did.
Oh man.
But it makes me wonder, since you mentioned it, and since my Gen Z daughter is here, do you feel that kind of pressure?
Sometimes, especially like being on social media, there's a lot of guys my age who are like, if she's not a Proverbs 31 woman, I don't want to marry her. And I'm like, well, how am I supposed to live up to these like perfect expectations of what a woman should be?
You know what makes me really, the saddest thing about that to me is that these men have not been given the proper heart and attitude about this particular poem. And so they are missing out on how beautiful your relationship with a woman can be when you start every day, every Friday, singing a song of praise to her worth and her value. That is the point of the poem. It's because the reality is all of history has been a patriarchal culture. We see in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament
From Adam.
All of history, right? But we see, and I just got goosebumps when I say this, we see this all the time, God's value of women, right? Because created he them in his image, both man and women, right? With innate God nature and innate God value. And we see this all the time. Every time God wants to work a miracle, he finds a barren woman and gives a son.
Or a teenage girl.
Or a teenage girl. And so,
and I said this to you at the end of another podcast we were recording. I said to you, did you ever realize that God made Adam out of dust, breathed life into him, but he made Eve out of bone?
That's right. That's right. Well, see,
which is a much harder, more dense
substance.
Right.
And this
made of fortitude.
Exactly. And I think that like the thing is about the thing about patriarchy, and I've been listening to this awesome podcast called Man Enough that's really good, and it's just like men talking about how to be men in a world that has also, because the thing about a patriarchal standard is that it also robs men. Nobody
feminized
wins.
our men. We've feminized our men.
Well, I don't know necessarily. I don't know what that means exactly.
No, go ahead with what you're saying.
No, but what I mean is that like, you know, so instead of this poem being an opportunity for men to offer praise, to offer an ode, to live in a place of gratitude for their companion, it's been twisted to be, if you don't live up to this, you're not good enough for me.
And that's what you feel like you see on social media.
And that's what you're seeing on social media.
I do have to say, though, like, not every guy obviously is like that. I have a lot of friends who are not that way. And I have a lot of friends who are dating guys who are not that way.
Yeah.
And so, like, I do have to say, like, not every guy, because I'm seeing a lot more on social media. There's a lot more people my age who are starting to say, like, hey, we want to be able to make enough money for our wives. But, like, with the economy and everything, it makes it hard. But, I mean, that's their goal. That's my brother-in-law's goal. He's told me that. He said, my goal in life is to be able to make enough money to let my sister stay at home if possible. He's like, it's going to be hard, but that's his goal at the end of the day. So there's kind of a shift going on in our society, in my generation at least, maybe not everyone, but who are like starting to see the other side of it. Like, hey, it's okay if my wife stays home. It's okay if she works. Like, they're kind of just more.
It sounds like we're moving in a direction where we no longer have a narrative around the stay-at-home person. And that the stay-at-home person is like less than, because like, you know, your husband was a stay-at-home person for a while.
With the older sister, yes.
And there's this idea that like, you know, that it made him less than, or that it devalued him.
He didn't go out in public really ever. And that was fine because he's an introvert.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, I need play dates and I've got to talk to other adult human beings.
Oh, yeah,
like,
I can't just have My Little Pony all day long.
Yeah. But he would go out and people was like, oh, they must be divorced, so it must be his day to have the kids or whatever. Like that's sort of the and I made 3 times as much as he did at the time. And I was good at my job. I was good at it. However, now that I'm on the other side of raising kids, you're on the other side, Lakeisha, you said. And the focus that I have, though I'm still homeschooling, this is my last official semester of being the homeschool mom, if you will. I just turn into a facilitator for the next 2 years.
You get to graduate too.
Not yet, but he's dual enrolling.
Yeah.
So this will be I'm in my 17th year of homeschooling. But now that I have my real estate career, and I know you're embarking on a new part of your education career, you want to be a principal, I think she was telling us, or you want to be an administrator of some sort.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the things that got me here, the long nights, the sleepless nights, the bloody noses in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
I mean, all of those things have made the path that I'm choosing to follow now, that I feel like God's calling me, it have made me the woman that I am, so that I can be this now in the second part or whatever part of my life we are. It doesn't mean that I'm no longer their mom. It just means now the focus is no longer on every single moment of my day on the children. And I loved that part of my life. And I never thought I'd get to be that. I wasn't raised to be that kind of mom. I was raised, you go to college, you get a job, you have some kids, you drop them off daycare, you go back, you work, and this is the cycle over and over again. I would not trade one moment, as hard as homeschooling was.
Yeah.
I'm pointing at my daughter. As hard as it was in some parts, I wouldn't trade it. I've had the most precious, and I have an education degree. I have the most precious moments with my children that I would never have had the Lord put me on a different path. The Lord put me on this path, and I feel like I have done the best of my ability. I have failed in some spots. We all have, right? I have been really successful in some spots, and I'm joyous with it. I have, at least right now, 4 children and a son-in-law who are walking with the Lord. I cannot ask for anything more than that. I really can't. They love the Lord. They're seeking Him daily. I can't ask for more than that.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way. Like with my daughters, I have 3, but with my daughters, I've spent my time as being a mom trying to take some of the expectation that society puts on them off of them and let them know, like, you can love the Lord, but you can do this as well. You can love the Lord, and you don't need to hold yourself to high standards, yes, but know that you're going to make mistakes and you're going to fail, and it's okay. It's okay. That's how we learn. That's how things happen. And I think because I took some of that pressure off of them, they're able to be like, they're in college, one's getting ready to graduate college, and they are on their career path, and they're proud of who they are. They love who they are, and they know who they are. And I think that that's like really important. So it's not, they're looking for a man is not going to have to tell them who they are. They know who they are. Yeah. And, and they know their worth. They know that they're a Proverbs 31 woman within their own right of what they do. And they know they don't have to do, dot all the I's. They can be who they are, and that's okay. So I agree with you on that. Like, that's the purpose of this journey, I think, as women. Like, to know tell our children, you're going to make mistakes. That's going to happen sometimes, but be who you are, learn from the mistakes, keep growing, keep loving God,
And the rest will fall into place. And that's another thing.
I think clarity of message.
Yeah.
Whatever the message is. But the message, TZ and I are a little bit closer in age. I'm older. I'm going to be 50 in a couple weeks, but.
Well, Keisha, are you 39?
I'm 43.
43.
So she's
I'm
actually
42.
I thought she was in her 20s.
Thank you.
I know.
I appreciate that.
It's that good, lovely skincare.
I got to know what's your skincare regimen. But anyway.
She makes skincare.
Oh,
really?
Wow. But I'm a Gen Xer, 50-year-old, almost 50 years old. The message was never very clear.
Yeah.
My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she was like, you're going to college, you're going to get a degree, you're going to have an education, and then when you're like 30-something, you can have kids. And then I was like, but you had your first child when you were a teenager. I mean, she was married, but you had your children in your 20s, and by the time you were 26, your body was back to the way it, you don't drop weight in your 30s like you did in your 20s. And
listen.
Then when you get to 50.
Listen. Oh, man, I had these 2 kids, y'all. I had them at 39 and 41. It is, you know what? The old gray Marion what she used to be. I'll be 42 in August.
Oh. I thought you were in your 30s, too.
Thank you.
I know, right?
Thank you. It's running around after these kids. But it's
a lot of fun.
Speaking about guns, I was laughing because I went to the gym the other day.
Did we speak about
guns? Yeah, you were talking about arms.
Oh, arms.
Right? Arms, right? Guns.
I was thinking about weapons, but
guns,
you're thinking about arms.
Yeah. In the slang the kids these days use. So I went to the gym and I was going to take a high intensity interval training class because I'm not new. I've been here before, right? I know how to exercise. I like it a lot. I just had a C-section. And so everything from the neck down to the knees is a little jigglier than it used to be because I had a lot of immense healing to do in order to get back to this place. So I go to this class and the instructor gives me this sideways glance. And let me just tell you, everybody else in that room, I don't think any of them had any kids. All of their bodies were just rock hard, right? And he kept looking at me sideways as I'm trying to follow along everyone else set up, but he didn't really talk to me or anything like that. And he came over to me and he said, so this is your first time in this class. I'm like, yeah. I was like, what's your fitness level? Not what weight do you typically lift?
Yeah.
Not what exercises you typically do, which is generally when I've been to a class for the first time, how that question is asked. Not like an up and down at my postpartum 20 being like, what's your fitness level? And I was like, I looked at him and in my head, I thought my fitness level is I carry a 30-pound toddler and an 18-pound toddler up a flight of concrete steps every day because if I pick up the baby, the toddler wants to be picked up too. That's my fitness level, sir. You know, my fitness level is tossing children like bags of flour because they like to be lifted up in the air when we're listening to music, okay? Don't question me. I have reserves. You have no idea. Shut up and give me the weights. I was so mad because I could tell he saw the extra weight, right? And he didn't understand that there is a bone underneath this. I can handle the class. Also, I know how to read, so I did read the class description. But that happens, right? Like, yeah, you get. I don't know how I got it. I don't know how I got there, Srita.
Okay. Well, let's go back. Let's go back
ADHD.
to the virtuous valor.
The virtuous valorous woman.
Valorous woman.
Yeah. So, but so what this poem is, and if I can just surmise what I think or summarize what I think we're saying, right? So this poem is all about these attributes and these things that women do. And we live in a culture that instead of recognizing that this is an ode to women, has made it a rule and a mark that women are like a ruler or a measuring stick. And so what we've missed is the fact that however you choose to be a woman, it's not about these very specific things because not every woman has a child. Not every woman, some women have their own businesses, some women don't, whatever. It's about recognizing that however God made you as a woman, you are made in his image, and the way that you uniquely walk in the world as a woman is valuable and it's important and it's different than the way men walk in the world. And that's good. And it deserves to be acknowledged and lifted up. And I think that, like, back to your mom, you said that you're going to go to school, you're going to go here, you do this. I think that was another thing about first wave feminism is that, like, the appreciation had been removed, right? And it was like, yeah, but you do these things because you're women, like that's your job. Like you don't deserve necessarily on a societal level, because I'm sure some men like really care for their wives. But I read a 1950s economic book, a home economic book one time. And it was like, keep the children from him when he gets home from work. He's had a hard day and doesn't want to talk to them. You better have a meal on the table the second he walks in the door.
Meanwhile, my children would launch themselves off the top step. This one right here, Daddy's home, like flying off the top step into his arms. I would that's one of his most precious memories. I would never have shielded him from those children when he got home from work.
And that's what I mean about patriarchy could have robbed from men too, because it was almost like if you enjoy being a father, if you enjoy your young children, like that you are less of a man. So really you need to have a stoic, like my husband loves my girls. When he comes home and like the baby like crawls as fast as she can, but like there was a period of time where those gender roles were so restrictive that what I think happened is that we were robbed of the actual reality of it, which is the gratitude of each person being a pillar in the home. And that with the two together, we hold this up as a team. Not like, yeah, obviously you're going to make the dinner because I make all the money, right? Instead of like, thank God I have a partner at home that is doing all of this work for our family, right? Like that's the piece that was missed. And so
or denigrated. Wasn't missed.
It was denigrated. That's it. That's it.
And that keeping a clean house and cooking for 2, 5, 4, 6 people,
3 times a day,
and working, and educating, that's all denigrated as less value than if I had gone out and slogged a 50-hour week and made $90,000 a year, and that's just so you're almost looked down upon if that is your goal in life. And I think that's an aspirational goal. I looked at my oldest daughter and I said, don't you ever be ashamed that is you want to be a good wife and a good mom.
Right.
Don't ever. I said, if people look down on you, that's them. You only have to think about what God values your worth at. And she found a man who valued that as a wife. And that is wonderful because that's the way that's the path that God has for her at some point. But when we denigrate the natural role of the feminine and the natural role of the masculine in the method that it was meant, as far as I'm concerned, scripturally. I know we may differ in here a little bit about that thought, but
we're here to talk about what we agree about.
Yeah, but like the roles that they were given.
Yeah.
And just the natural. If you had told me when I was Ella's age that I was going to nurture a family and educate them at home and cook 3 meals a day and teach them to cook, and I'd have been like, you lost your mind. You have lost your mind.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a career woman, and I'm going to break the glass ceiling, and I'm going to do all these things. And I didn't want that. When she came along, she's my second, Ella's my second, I wanted nothing more than to be there for every single moment with her that I missed with the oldest one. And then I had the 2 boys, and I was there for that too. And I would not trade that for the $1 million beach house and all the cars that I could afford and that kind of thing. I just wouldn't trade it, not for a minute.
I'll tell you something. However your children appear in your life, you're a mom. However your children show up, if you are a mom to those children, you are a mom to those children, and I would never take that away from a mother.
And that's to the grandmas raising kids and the aunts raising kids,
right?
And the sisters.
You know, the aunties. You know, my great grandmother was raised by her aunt because her mom didn't really like girls. Right? This was in 1903. Right? So Aunt Cynthia was a mom. Right? But you guys, when I made a person in my body and then brought it out into the world, I was like, I had no idea the sense of empowerment and worth and value that was going to give me internally, and the cognitive dissonance that I experienced walking out into a world that acted like that was commonplace. Like, yeah, whatever, that's what you do. Who cares? Whatever, it's not that important. I had to really sit with that.
Oh, and the fact that you've thought that too.
Yes, that's it. That's exactly it, Sarita, because I didn't realize how little, I just got goosebumps all over my whole body. I didn't realize how much of that I had bought into until I had a baby. And like my whole belief system about who I am and my value and my worth. That's why at the top of the episode, I made a comment about how like when I struggled to be comfortable being a stay-at-home mom. I felt like I had sacrificed my career and all stuff. That's why like Dylan looked at me and was like, oh my, that is your indoctrination under patriarchy coming out of you. That's not how you really believe. That's not how you really feel, because I've listened to you talk about it. Like, you know, and so like, in this period of time in my life where God has I want to say forced me to be a stay-at-home mom. I don't mean it that way, but that's like took away any option.
He's given you that role.
Yeah. He's just given me that role, and that's the role that I'm in. I am almost ashamed to admit how much I forking love it.
Thank you for not cussing.
I did that on purpose. I practiced that the whole way down here. I practiced that because it's the emphasis I need at times. I've been like, I can't believe how much I like it. Do you know what I did the other day? I made a beach for the girls on the inside of my house. I took a bunch of Cheerios and pureed them together with avocado oil and then put it on a tray with all of their beach toys and then put the beach on YouTube and then took a tub of water that I put blue food coloring in and then put it down on a towel. And my 3-year-old
You just homeschooled your children, by the way.
Yep.
She was running around screaming, "We're at the beach." And we were like, she had the most fun ever, you know? And like, but like 22-year-old Tiziana, I would have never, ever. I loved my nieces and nephews, and I loved it when they went home. I did not have children until I was almost 40. And you know, Keisha knows I love kids because her and I worked in the youth department. I love those children, and I care deeply for children.
But they got to go home to somebody else.
But I would have never thought that so much of my identity and the pleasure that it gave me to create that environment for my children, like the pleasure that it gave me.
Listen, let me back that up a couple of steps.
Yeah.
Okay. I never thought that the moment the pastor said in December 11th of 1991, I now pronounce you husband and wife, I got chills. That I still remember being called a wife for the first time. What an amazing role. Like I'm somebody's wife. Like,
Yeah.
wow. I'd only been somebody's daughter or somebody's sister, but I get to be somebody. What does that mean? And then
I felt that way the second.
And then I was wondering, then the next time when they said, you're a mommy.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went, oh, that's a great title. I love that.
Yeah.
And then I got to be a mother-in-law. Not always the greatest title, but in my case, woo.
You get to be Naomi.
The other people, they got a high standard to live up to bring home an in-law. But yeah, like just having these titles that at 21, I'd have been like, oh, no, don't want to do that. Don't want to be somebody's wife. I don't want to be somebody's ball and chain.
Right. Because of the social narrative around not just not elevating the role of women, but denigrating it. And I think it's in the simplest of places. Like I was married when I had my second daughter, but it was only my insurance that paid for her birth. It wasn't even his insurance that paid for it. Because even in that regard, for some reason, it's still like we still haven't elevated the powerful thing that happens when a woman gives birth to a baby that everybody wants to figure out how to support her to care for it. You know, it was still like, yeah, but, you know, now you're going to have $30,000 worth of medical bills or whatever.
I'm going to say something a little controversial here. And when we made it my body, my choice, and you take the father's role out of any decision that is made, and I truly get it. I understand. I have been on the my body, my choice side of things. When you take the father's role out, and some people don't even say who the father. Now, some fathers just run away and
that's not there. Yeah,
that's But if the father wants to be a part of that, we've taken away any say that he has. Now, there are some states that are trying to make a registry. So if I got pregnant, and I wanted to put him on the registry, he would be financially responsible for the baby if I chose to keep it. And he would have, but I think when we have, you go back to, I don't know when the role of the father stopped being necessary for children. I think
that's
it's very important.
right.
And the role of the mother, those traditional roles, there's nothing wrong with them, except they didn't fit whatever narrative that was wanting to be.
Yeah, and like in terms of like industrialization and modernity, if you have a man that cares for his children and wants to be at home with his children, you have a man that's going to be less productive. And so if I can tell you that loving your children and wanting to be home with them isn't something that you should want as a man, that you shouldn't even want that as a man, then it will be a lot easier to get you to work 60-hour work weeks now, won't it? Well, and I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, and it's for if you're a stay-at-home mom, are you producing taxes? Nope.
Yeah. You know what's funny? My daughter was diagnosed with developmental delay, so she was given a voucher to go to daycare. We still had to pay. But we paid a reduced price because it was medically necessary to get her around other kids and around quality education to get her up to speed because she was born premature, right? But because I don't work, because I don't have because I didn't make $6,000 or more, because I do work a little bit here and there, right? But it's very small. We don't get to write off all the money we spent on her daycare off on our taxes. But we still paid that money, and it was still a medically necessary diagnosis. Like even that in some ways is punishing the stay-at-home mom, is punishing a family for having a single earner by not allowing for the same kind of tax deductions that any family in our same tax bracket would have gotten, because we're not in a huge tax bracket. We still qualify for Medicaid. That's how little money we make, right? But just because one of us is the stay-at-home parent, we don't qualify. We don't have that amount of money we paid recognized. And even that is sort of like, it's punishing families for having one of the parents be be a stay-at-home parent in some ways.
I mean,
you know?
that's still the case too for like single parents. Like if
Yeah.
you make too much money, according to, even though you might be making barely enough to live off of, right? You don't qualify for anything.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're in this new bracket. And so you're like, it's like a punishment. Like, do I want to achieve more and still struggle?
Yeah.
Or do I not try to achieve more so I can get more support?
Yeah.
And it's it's the way we have things set up now. It makes it hard to, for families, for single people, married people, whatever. It makes it hard for us to elevate if we want to elevate, or whatever our norm is going to be. It just makes it hard for us.
It makes it hard. And
Yeah.
that's one of the things that like I've always like that's one of the key arguments that I now have. I didn't have this before, but like when we talk about America as a Christian nation, I'm like, then we need to subsidize families that have a stay-at-home parent. You need to have every child have the same access to like the same early childhood education, the same quality, like we should be, if that was the case, then I think we would live in a nation where we would honor and acknowledge and uplift women and children.
But in my case, I didn't want access to that education. So why shouldn't I get that money back?
Access to which education?
Any
Early childhood
education. I didn't want my children in public education. I had been a teacher. So you were saying having
so then you should get a subsidy for the work that you do as a stay-at-home parent teaching your kid.
I should just get my taxes back.
Maybe. I mean, I just say there should be some way for there to be an acknowledgement that if you are doing all this extra work
since 1993 when it became legal. Give us. We have to pay for our own curriculum. We have to do our own stuff. We still pay taxes to the school that we don't have access to. Well, in North Carolina you don't. In South Carolina you do. But
wow.
Yeah, in South Carolina, my kids could play sports teams, be part of the orchestra, play in the band. North Carolina, nope, cannot do it.
So you have to pay taxes in North Carolina.
Access. No equal access.
If you're going to homeschool your kids. But
everybody pays taxes to the local school system.
Sure. Wow.
For nothing in North Carolina. For nothing.
It's because they use property taxes.
Yeah. Well, that's a whole other conversation.
Yes. Anyway, we're not
preferentially, because that preferentially creates better school systems in places that have higher property taxes.
People love a meritocracy until it costs them money.
Yeah.
So, do we want to solve the world's
we want
issues,
to talk
or we
about
want to talk about Proverbs 31?
But right?
Sorry.
Yeah, no, exactly. But that was kind of this, honestly.
But we can solve the world's problems if you want to. We can try to solve
But this is really
issue.
what I had in mind. And speaking of which, this might actually be a good place to put a pause in this, because we try to keep our episodes at just about an hour, a little bit more. And so we want to thank you guys for listening. And I think that this is a good place to put a pin in it, because I think we have set the stage, and now we can do the next piece, which is actually going through the poem itself. So, Ella, Sarita, and Keisha.
And little bit Andy.
And and only when it supports what we're already saying, Andy. So you guys enjoy this episode and share it with friends, and come back next time on Notes from the Underground, where we're gonna actually talk about the actual scripture. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
We'll see ya.
So we can do the. I don't even know how it works. Rick always does it.
Does Rick do that?
There it is. She's got it. I was doing it wrong.
You didn't do your pickow, but I don't think I introduced you properly.
No, you didn't. It's fine. Don't matter.
You don't matter this time.
Nope.
Hey guys, this is Rick from the Boroughs of Berea. Do you know how much blood, sweat, and tears it takes to make a podcast? None. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't cost a lot. And so if you guys don't mind, if anybody would like to give to help us with these episodes, it would be great. We'll put out even more content. And if you go to our Patreon page, just search for the Boroughs of Berea, you'll get extra notes, extra episodes, and it's pretty much free. $1 gets you a lot. Thanks, guys.
All right.
I will say this. The soonest that I can leave my house on a regular basis is today I left at 5:13 because Dylan gets home at 5. And of course, he's covered in fiberglass and, asbestos or whatever, because he's an electrician. So it's imperative he has to shower because he can't touch the children with all that stuff on him. So, he got home at 5 o'clock, directly showered. I got in the car. So the soonest I could leave was 5:13. And it still took me that long to get here from Hendersonville because of the rain and the traffic and all of that stuff. It's frustrating. But yeah, so it's been nice to sort of like, without the extra added challenge of artificial hormonal influence, get a chance to sort of like evaluate that narrative a little bit, because I'm curious, you know, chicken or egg. Like, obviously some people have a cycle that causes a lot of problems, and that's valid. But there's also people.
I would say that your general topic is probably medicine worldwide. Like, the field of medicine, we want to rush to over medicate instead of trying to figure out what gets to the root of the problem.
Yeah, and
don't ever mention holistic to a regular doctor, unless you go to a holistic doctor,
Because they think you're hilarious.
Because they think you're
Because they think you're hilarious. Because they know it doesn't work.
Or they think it doesn't work, but
work,
for some people it does. Just like some drugs don't work for some people, where some drugs do.
Here's the thing: 90% of everything that'll ever happen to you in your life will go away no matter what. So, like, having a bunch of holistic medicine and then being like, I got better. Like, you're probably going to get better anyway. Statistically, no matter what happens to you, you're going to get better. As a matter of fact, you're only not going to get better once, really. Every other time in your life, you're going to get better.
Yeah.
And most of the time, with just like normal care, proper care, healthy, whatever, and rest, you're going to be fine anyway, short of like, broken bones, things like that.
I will say, that being said, acupuncture has done wonders for me. And when I was struggling to get pregnant, acupuncture and herbs to help support, the uterus and healthy cycles was helpful.
Maybe I don't know enough about that to really.
That's right, Andy. That's lady talk.
Directly on acupuncture.
No uterus, no opinion.
I was talking about the acupuncture.
I'm giving you a hard
all sorts
time.
of opinions about your uterus.
Where I'm sure you do.
I don't have one, so no, you don't. Yo, mama.
Yeah. No, I think there's a distinct lack. Yeah. A distinct lack of gentlemen in the room for a reason today.
I'm wearing women's sneakers, if that helps.
Oh, that is helpful.